I think we're ready to go. So hi everyone, I'm Adam.
I'm Shelley.
And we're missing Vivian, who couldn't join us today. This is a presentation about a piece of professional development that Vivian and I designed and facilitated and that Shelley participated in. And so we wanted to share it. And so firstly, why professional development for tutors? A lot of motivation for the idea is captured by this quote from a paper by Gail Crimmins and her partners in crime. Casual academics feel unsupported. They'd like more professional development. Professional development conducted for casual and permanent staff could or would, according to the findings in this paper, make casual academics feel supported and assist in creating a uniform approach to teaching and to learning and teaching. So there are quite a few aspects there, but maybe you can see how they fed into the ideas that Vivian and I had. So Vivian was coordinating a first year subject for mathematics students, or for students who weren't really majoring in mathematics but had to take some mathematics. And I was co-coordinating a subject for all science students, a first year subject. So we're working with first year students, large courses, lots of tutors, and Vivian and I noticed a mismatch between the intended and implemented curricula. What do we mean by that? Well, we had plans and schemes and designs for what would be happening in our workshops and tutorials. And workshop just sort of means a tutorial with a computer in this context. But Vivian and I both spent time observing the workshops and the tutorials and saw that what we had in mind was not necessarily the same as what was happening. So that's the difference between the intended and the implemented curriculum. And that Vivian and I were talking about this, and we realized that we had communities of committed tutors that had developed a culture independent from the lecturers and the course coordinators, partly because there'd been recent turnovers in who was coordinating the course. But the tutors were actually sort of, they were the longer serving sort of constituents. So the tutors have been in the course for a while. They've been left to a sort of create an independent culture for a while as sort of different people were coordinating the course. And Vivian and I both had an idea that maybe we could do something about that. We wanted to do something to improve the alignment between the intended and implemented curricula. So that's that unified approach to learning and teaching that we see in the Crimmins et al. Article. And we wanted to improve that through improved understanding of the particular course design principles at play. So in other words, Vivian and I wanted to share some of our ideas about about course design as a way to sort of improve the alignment. And then we also wanted to support the participants. So the casual academics working in our courses, we wanted to facilitate the sharing of practice and develop professional identity. You know, we see in the quote at the top, that's a good thing. And then we sort of wanted to initiate and encourage an inclusive community of practice. And by inclusive, we mean including us. So we wanted to, that's the workshops for casual and permanent staff. So Vivian and I, it's not like we wanted to just manipulate the understanding of casual academics. We wanted to create a community of practice which included everyone, so we can all learn and develop. So that's the long introduction, but the implementation plan is pretty quick, right? So Vivian and I, we didn't have resources available to do this, so it was a bit of an experiment. So we wanted to hit upon a plan that was pretty straightforward to implement and didn't require resources. So we decided 3 one-hour meetings. We thought that would be a good start. We'd use the Socratic method because Vivian and I, based on our own experiences of professional development, agreed that the best professional development is discussion-based and reflective. People don't want to come along to professional development to hear a lecture. They want to come along and be recognized as professionals and grow as professionals. But because they're professionals, they've got experience and they want to share it. And then, so after the 3 one-hour meetings, we'd have follow-up observations. In other words, I went along and watched the participants as they were practicing, so running workshops and tutorials, and then we'd have a brief reflective discussion afterwards, have a chat about what I saw, and then I wrote a letter recording Vivian and I wrote a letter recording the participation and aspects of the observation. So unfortunately, we didn't have any resources, so tutors didn't get paid for their time for the 3 one-hour meetings. So the motivation, we're relying on tutors being motivated by because they wanted to improve, or they wanted to engage in professional development, but also they might be motivated by the letter of observation. So this worked to some extent. We've got 9 participants, including Shelley. And then the last part of the plan is how we're going to assess whether what we did worked in some way. And we hit upon something which we thought would be low fuss, is that we'd assess the professional development by asking the participants to send us an email summarising what we did. We figured if the participants could tell us what happened, and we agreed that that's what, and Vivian and I could recognise our intention in what the participants experienced, then maybe it worked. So let's have a look at one of those emails. Shelley.
So I wrote notes during all of the sessions. So this is kind of a summary of my notes, evaluating the outlooks of the session. So we'll just kind of give you a minute to read through that rather than me dictating it to you.
This could be an audiobook experience, but we think you can read it as well. All right, Shelley, is there anything that, when you look at that, is there anything that sort of jumps off the page at you as sort of particularly memorable?
So I'm going to talk about this a little bit on the next slide, but it's really the treatment as an academic. So before I get into that, I thought I'd go over some of the things that Adam touched on, but why we wanted to be involved, or why I wanted to be involved. Basically, I've been teaching since 2015 in this first year course, and the only exposure to professional development I had was right at the start when I was essentially sitting in a lecture and they told me how to use some of the admin materials. So I was really curious about what this kind of professional development was going to involve. And for me, I really wanted to improve. So I kind of had an idea that I was good at my job because I had student feedback, which told me that I was, but I could always improve, and I'd kind of hit a point where I'd been tutoring for so long that I didn't know where I could go. And then the other motivating factor, which Adam said he hoped was a motivating factor, so it's good that it was that letter. So I'm kind of interested in staying in academia, and up until this point, I didn't really have any proof that I was good at my job from someone kind of higher up in the ranks, I guess, let's call it that. So it was nice to have that kind of motivating me forward. So from the sessions, one of the things that I really got from it was a better understanding of the motivations of our workshops. So we have a bunch of questions that the students do, and they get for our course, they get a participation point for that. And going into my preparation, usually I would look at what maths we're learning, for example, but being able to really connect that with the learning outcomes, which I later learned was called constructive alignment, was really important, and it really shifted the way that I think about my teaching. The other really good thing about professional development was seeing how other tutors teach. So like Adam said, we did kind of have this community. I knew a lot of the people there and I taught with them for a long time, but I didn't really have any insight into the way that they taught. So that was a really interesting thing to get out of it. In terms of how my teaching practices have changed, it's like I mentioned, there's a lot more consideration of the other aspects of the course, those learning outcomes. So when I looked at the course profile previously, I would see the assessment and I would think, this is how we lead towards the assessment. But obviously there's all these other goals and outcomes that we hope for the students to get out of it. Also, I now have a little bit more of a focus on the interplay between lectures and workshops. So really paying attention to what is happening in what lecture and how I can draw the students in with that, because I kind of have a feeling now that the students learn the best when they participate in all aspects of the course, not just mine. What I'm doing is part of, a bigger picture. How I feel about professional development. I really like my letter of recommendation. It really made me feel quite valued. I keep it at my desk. And it's also evidence that I am committed to teaching and I am good at my job, which is a really good thing to be able to get out of it. Also, so I mentioned on the previous evaluation that we were told that we're academics, but I really felt like an academic in that room. So I kind of went in expecting a lecture because that's what I'd experienced before, but I really felt like a valued member of an academic community when we're having those discussions. And also to point out is later that year, I actually won a teaching award, and I would say that that is in part because of that added confidence that I really got from being treated like an academic, being thought of as an academic in that professional development. So just to round it off in what I would like to have different, a real motivating factor at the start going in was that it was only a couple of short sessions. It wasn't a huge time commitment from me, which was great. But this was something that happened last year. I would love for it to be, maybe an annual thing with a couple of sessions so that I could continue to build, because I still think that there's ways I can improve. Also, and this is probably because of the no resources thing, where we were doing the professional development wasn't really reflective of a teaching room. So it would be nice to have kind of more of a tutorial space to learn in.
Great. Thanks. So, Shelley said lots of interesting things there, of course. But now I'd sort of just like to summarise the way that Vivian and I felt about it. What was our assessment after we ran it? So we were the designers and facilitators. Well, from looking at the email summaries, remember that was our idea of how we would get some information to assess things. We could see the key messages from each session that they were received because the participants reflected them back to us. And we also saw the participants reflecting on their own practice, just briefly. So we felt like the message that the sessions were effective in that sense, that the messages had been delivered, and that there was also quite a few comments in the emails that tutors enjoyed, particularly the pragmatic moments, ideas for facilitating small group discussions. So that was good. Some other thoughts that Vivian and I had about how it all went is that we just thought it was fun and the discussion was rich. Remember, one of the key ideas was that Vivian and I were engaging in the professional development. We were facilitating, but we're also engaging in it. In other words, we're listening to people and we're talking about teaching together. We thought the email summaries turned out to be an easy and effective assessment technique. There were no fuss for the people to write, for the participants to write, I hope. And there was certainly no fuss technique for us to get information. The observations took time, but I was happy to spend it. And of course, this would be the hardest thing to scale up. The participants seemed surprised that we didn't teach them. Shelley mentioned that she went in thinking that she was going to get a lecture. And so there was definitely some surprise. But being treated as a professional was well received. And the motivation mechanism, where we said, well, unfortunately we couldn't pay people, but we could offer a letter of observation and the opportunity to improve. That attracted the right crowd. So we got 9 people, but there were sort of 9 interesting people who wanted to be in the room engaging in professional development. And so Vivian and I agreed that we'd do this again when circumstances permit. So 2020 is not the year for such things, or at least the first semester was not. So what would I change? I took too long to write the letters of observation, and that's because I lost my notebook with the observation notes because I'm a loser. And yes, I would arrange a better room to project a more professional environment. Sort of an aside, the math department building was being renovated, and so we were all sort of spread across campus. And that, if I could, I'd like the tutors to be paid for their time, but and maybe a larger cohort to make the discussions even richer. All right, so Shelley, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
So I think we'd be happy to take some questions now.
Thank you, Adam and Shelley. Any questions around how they worked with how Adam and Vivian worked with their tutors? No questions. It's interesting. It's pretty well known across the sector that it is hard to engage casuals. Did you find you had success because it was very discipline focused and related to a particular course rather than being delivered from a central unit doing PD?
I would say it was probably because it was the course coordinators of those courses offering professional development to tutors in those courses. So we already had a connection and we had something in common. I think that's probably important. Shelley, would you have gone along?
Yeah, it was nice that I knew who was involved and I knew the other, I guess, participants. And the other thing is that even though it was coming obviously from course coordinators from Adam and Vivian, I feel that the things that we learn are really quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Transferable across other things. Like I've been known to teach in biology labs, and the things that I learnt in this professional development could really apply there as well.
So Shelley's actually a biologist. I'm a mathematician and Vivian's yeah, so I think the personal connection between the facilitators and the tutors was definitely helpful. It would be interesting to see whether the same activities worked with a broader range of tutoring experiences. We had to start somewhere. It was a bit of a pilot expedition.
Yeah, you do have to start somewhere. So certainly thinking it's sort of across CQU University, we've got so many campuses. So then how do you encourage your casuals to be part of that?
We're learning about the virtual thing. The letter of observation turned out to be the right lure in some way. But I think what people enjoyed, Shelley likes the letter, which I'm delighted about, but I think what people, I think the participants, we all genuinely enjoyed those discussions. It turns out that people are really interesting. Right? If we just accept each other as professionals and talk about the craft, it's actually pretty interesting.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Adam and Shelley?